Good evening and welcome to this 40th Legislative District Live Telephone Town Hall with your State Senator, Liz Lovelett, and your State Representative, Alex Ramel. Representative Debra Lekanoff regrets that she is unable to join us this evening because she is in an appropriations hearing. Okay, the first thing you need to know is that if you have a question for your legislators, all you need to do is press 0. The 40th District includes San Juan County and parts of Skagit and Whatcom counties, including Anacortes and Burlington, and parts of Bellingham and Mount Vernon. My name is Lily, and I will be your host tonight. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Today is the 45th day of this 60-day session, so your state lawmakers want to give you an update and answer your questions. Please press 0 on your phone right now to ask a question, and you'll be placed on the queue. Again, we are calling you tonight because your lawmakers want to answer your questions. Press 0 to ask them about issues that matter to you, such as healthcare, education, the environment, technology, energy, transportation, and the budgets. So, if you have a question for State Senator Liz Lovelett and State Representative Alex Ramel, please press 0 right now to speak with your lawmakers. Remember, press 0 on your phone right now to ask a question. Now I'll turn it over to your legislators for some opening remarks. Let's start with Senator Lovelett.
Thank you so much for moderating tonight, and thank you to everyone who has phoned in to join this teletown hall. I'm Senator Liz Lovelett out of Anacortes. I do want to just make sure to pass on the regrets of Representative Lekanoff. One of the things about this time of session is we never know how late important, particularly budget hearings, are going to go, and so she needs to be there so she can vote on many important measures that are under consideration at the legislature. So general context setting, we are about 15 days out from adjournment, and we are at the point in session where we are getting the last of opposite chamber bills through their policy and fiscal committees. So this time of year is very fast paced. You know, we have only a handful of hearings to consider all of the work products that have come over from the opposite chamber. So the House is considering Senate bills, the Senate is considering House bills, and then remaining work in adopting all of our budgets for operating, capital, and transportation. As a general note, I serve on the Local Government Committee as the Vice Chair, have spent 8 sessions on Energy, Environment, and Technology, and currently sit on the Transportation Committee as well. So some of the things I want to address in these opening remarks is, our email inboxes, our phone lines, folks on the street. One of the things that we hear about really consistently is overreach from the federal government and how uncertain our communities feel, especially in the face of national incidents that have sparked action in Washington state. So just wanted to start out with a number of measures that we are considering and passing in our chambers. So one that has already passed the Senate and is now moving through the House has to do with face coverings for police officers, other law enforcement, including ICE agents. We've heard loud and clear from our communities that in our democracy and in our Washington, we want to make sure that law enforcement is accountable by showing their faces, their badges, and making sure that folks know that if they're being picked up, that they're being lawfully picked up with a warrant and with a clear face so that people know who is arresting. We also want to make sure that ICE is not carrying out enforcement actions in our schools and in our hospitals. It is critical that every person in Washington state has access to health care and education. There has been a particular element that has been showing up at our schools really to instill fear in our communities of children and their families, and we have a bill to help prevent that from happening. We're also working on important things like regulating flock cameras. We want to make sure that the data that we're using in our local governments in order to help, catch up on things like speed enforcement in a school zone doesn't have sensitive information that can then be shared with the federal government. And we additionally have one that has to do with fining detention facilities if they don't allow the Department of Health in to do inspections. So a lot of work happening right now to protect Washingtonians. There's additional work happening at the Attorney General's office, and I recommend everybody check out the AGO's website to see where he is headed with litigation. But this is something we have heard loud and clear from our communities, and we want to make sure that we are providing every single opportunity that we have jurisdiction over to deliver meaningful safety protections for Washingtonians.
All right, thank you. Folks, please press 0 right now on your phone if you have a question. And next we have opening remarks from Representative Ramel.
Great. Thank you, Lily, and thanks, Liz, for opening up like that. One of the things we like to try to do when we're doing these town halls is just really showcase the way in which this team is working shoulder to shoulder to represent this community. And everything was said, I agree with 100%. And even though Debra's not here, we know she's in agreement too. The other thing I want to sort of tackle off the top here is our affordability crisis. Our inboxes are full of communications from people who are experiencing rising housing costs, rising grocery costs, rising healthcare costs, insurance, the list goes on. And we all know, we see in the paper or in our social media feeds every day the ways in which our federal government is making that worse. We're seeing, let's say, erratic communication about where the tariffs will be and how those will affect us, and whether we may get a rebate for funds that were apparently unconstitutional. We've also seen the Republican Congress pass H.R. 1, which we know is driving up healthcare costs and energy costs in real time. And we've got, I think, important proposals that at the state level we can take to bring down our insurance costs, and tackle energy prices, and tackle healthcare costs, and many more. I'm looking forward to getting into those details later on in the call today. But I think the most important thing we can be doing in Washington State right now to address the economic challenges that we're facing is to pass a millionaire's tax. This is a policy that's in front of the Finance Committee right now. I sit on the Finance Committee and will be voting on it on Friday. I look forward to voting yes. The bill has already moved out of the Senate. Senator Lovelett was enthusiastic yes, and she's cheering right now. And Representative Lekanoff also signed on in support of the bill. The important thing here is to take a look at the way that our tax code is in Washington State is upside down. We have one of the most regressive tax codes in Washington State. What that means in real terms is that the people who earn the least pay the most of their income towards state and local taxes, and the people with the biggest paychecks pay the least in state and local taxes. It's not fair, it's not right. And it also means that when we have a recession or an economic downturn, our budget at the state level is dependent on sales tax, especially, very regressive tax, and also really fickle. And what that means is that right at the moment that folks start needing a social safety net, we are asked to make cuts and make impossible choices about whether to cut early childhood education or health care. So for me, the biggest thing we can be doing to tackle our affordability crisis is a long-term improvement in our overall tax structure with the millionaire's tax. Lots of details. Happy to talk more about those at some point later this evening. But the other thing I just really want to highlight on that is that the polling shows that this is a bipartisan supported issue. The Seattle Times reported a couple of weeks back that over 50% of Republicans in Washington State support a millionaire's tax. So we've got that in front of us. We still have work to do to make sure we get all of the details right. But wanted to start off the conversation today answering probably the single most common question we heard at our in-person town hall last Saturday.
All right, thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question for Senator Lovelett or Representative Ramel. And you remember that we sent you a survey for submitting your questions in advance. So we got several of those, and we're going to start with one of those. I'm going to read it to you. And folks, those of you on the line, please press 0. Okay, Joe asks, where are you on House Bill 2333 and protecting our elected officials from harassment? Also, are you open to an amendment to take primary home residences of electeds off the PDC website?
Yeah, great question, Joe. Thank you for asking. I am supportive of that. The concern that is intended to address is the real risk that public servants face that we saw in really stark contrast in Minnesota when two state legislators were killed in their home, and there was a list of names and addresses in the car when the perpetrator was stopped. It's a scary time to be doing this work, and I know many of our colleagues and our peers and counterparts in city councils and county commissions, have real pause about their safety and their ability to do this work without looking over their shoulder right now. So I think we can take some reasonable and appropriate steps to protect personal information. Voters obviously need to know you live in the district that you're representing, and that can be solved. Some of the sort of record cleaning that is proposed in that bill is very expensive. We've talked about it already. We've got budget challenges this year. I don't think we can afford to do everything, but I think we can do the easy stuff this year with a commitment to continuing to make it safer and safer to serve so that everybody will be willing, anybody who wants to step up can do so and lead in their community without fear.
Thank you. If you are just joining us, this is a live telephone town hall with your 40th District legislators, Senator Lovelett and Representative Ramel. Next, we have a live question, and it is Albert, who has a question about cuts and services. Hi, Albert.
Thank you for taking my question. My question is this. I would like to address all of you there the fact of I'm not for, and neither should you be for, a state income tax in raising revenue on the citizens of Washington State. And the reason I say that is because your state budget has grown over 200% over the last 10 years. And that's an excessive amount to put that burden on citizens like myself who are straining to pay these bills. Politicians seem to always get in there and say, our money is endless. I mean, the taxpayers. It isn't endless. You need to understand we are at the end of our financial bucket. My pockets are empty, along with a lot of my neighbors. And yes, the money is gone, my friends. With that 200% increase in the state budget, you got to consider what your liabilities are. We're not responsible for everybody's housing, everybody's health care, legal and illegals. They need to go to their neighbors and ask them for help. And the government isn't always the source for this income and our housing and all that stuff. For every time that you raise people's taxes, you're putting somebody on the street as well. And I think you need to consider that. Please do not raise any more taxes. Cuts need to be necessary. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thank you for your question and sharing your thoughts with us. A couple of things I'd like to respond to on that. One, we cut more than $6 billion last year, and the cuts continue. And yes, we can't be everything to everybody, but basic services like education and health care are, the ability to have childcare slots and early learning. Not only are these things that are important safety net and basic services that I believe very strongly that the government should provide, but it also provides economic security to working people in Washington State. Families succeed when there are quality schools and childcare options. We made dramatic cuts in higher ed as well. That is how we get our young people positioned to be able to have jobs in our communities. So we certainly have scrubbed the books, cut as many things out as we can, and now the cuts are getting more and more painful each time we take a sweep. I will say that several of the last operating budgets that we passed on a bipartisan basis. we were all looking at the same revenue projections. We were all looking at the same expenditures, and those operating budgets came out with bipartisan support. This was not something where only the Democrats were responsible for creating this financial situation that we're in. And, you know, all of those things that are impacting people's pocketbooks, like inflation and the cost of labor, are also impacting the state. We have state employees that help, teachers are state employees, and, you know, everybody that answers the phone at an agency are state employees. These are all necessary folks in our community that help make sure that government is responsive. And the other thing I will say is the millionaire tax is targeted at 22,000 people in Washington state and generates $3.7 billion. We are talking about folks that have a lot of money and resources that should be directed into these social services that are the absolute fabric of our communities. You know, hospitals are state funded. These are all crucial services that we rely on. We have to pave roads. We have to provide ferries. All of these different things are not nice to have, they're must have. And, you know, the goal here is that we are asking the wealthiest among us to pay their fair share. And I will say we haven't had a lot of pushback from the millionaires who are going to pass this. You know, we do hear very consistently from folks that are not going to pay the tax, that it's going to spook the rich folks out of the state. They said that about capital gains. It just isn't true, and the data doesn't support that.
All right, thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers tonight. We have another question from the survey through internet. Juan Jose wants to know what you can do to improve the area of the bridge that connects to Mount Vernon.
I can start out on this one. So fun fact that I just found out a couple of years ago is that is actually a swivel bridge. It is meant to be able to turn sideways to allow ships to go along the Skagit River. That lends itself to some complicating factors as to the engineering renovation of that bridge. I know there's also some outstanding issues around kind of the channelization of pedestrian and bike traffic. We know that connects a significant elementary school to the library downtown, so that is absolutely on our radar, and we are trying to find ways that we can potentially add some better amenities on that bridge as we talk about its repair and maintenance. But it does make for some interesting structural challenges that it does in fact have to be able to swivel and is not just straight across the river bridge. I mean, I have lived in Skagit County almost my entire life. I had never seen it swivel before, so that was definitely something that I was not aware of. But there's a bunch of fantastic local organizations, you know, bike and other citizen groups that are really leading the charge at the grassroots community level on wanting to get some improvements to that bridge. It's such a bottleneck for folks trying to get to downtown Mount Vernon, so that's definitely on folks' radar, and we'll be looking at that in the coming years in the transportation budget.
Thank you. Press 0 on your keypad right now if you have a question for your lawmakers tonight. Next, we have Lynn, who has a question about gas prices. Hi, Lynn.
Yeah. You know, I live up here in Anacortes, and I'd like to know why our gas is so high. It's been going up here about every time you turn around. They're over $4. Shell down here is $4.59, and we got these refineries out here. And you look out there, and the oil tankers are coming in like they're going to McDonald's. So I like to know why our gas is so high. I don't understand it. And we have all this big talk in Washington, D.C., how we got oil. We're putting your drinking oil, Venezuela and all. Why is our gas so high here than it is in the Midwest? Or that's what I'd like to know.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Lynn.
Well, you can answer that. And one other one I'd like to know is how come we can't get Commercial Avenue paved? That little 2-mile strip.
On that to start. We just put $500,000 into the Senate transportation budget to kickstart that program to get commercial repaved. So there's good news on that front.
Yeah, good work on that, Senator. Lynn, regarding your question on gas prices, I'm a little bit speculative because there's 100 things that go into the cost of fuel. But comparing us to the Midwest is just complicated because we're geographically isolated from the rest of the country. And so the refineries that serve us only serve this area. And we just don't have the same sort of pipeline infrastructure that connects the rest of the country. One thing I will say that I'm keeping my eye on is the way that tariffs are impacting not just the price of fuel, but they're certainly impacting the price of crude oil that's coming across the border from Canada, which is the primary source of fuel at those refineries. But it's affecting, the tariffs are affecting the cost not just of fuel, but of so many other common, everyday items. And Liz is just reminding me that a lot of what they produce at those refineries is jet fuel, so it's not all just for local consumption.
Thank you so much. Folks, please press 0 on your phone if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next, we have JC, who has a question about ICE raids. Hi, JC.
Hello.
Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm a local student at Western Washington University, and I've seen from a lot of my classmates they are nervous about the ICE raids, and I was wondering what you can implement to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talked about it a little bit in my opening remarks, but specifically for university students, we just passed a bill by Senator Hansen that makes it so that in private spaces like at university campuses, ICE is not allowed to set up shop. We want to make sure that we're not intimidating people in their places of education and hospitals, in courthouses. But additionally, there is an important public information campaign right now around folks knowing their rights. Just because somebody knocks on your door doesn't mean you have to answer it. They need to have a warrant, and everyone in this country is entitled to due process. It's our Fourth Amendment protected right that you must have a reason to pick somebody up. You can't just pick them up because you feel like it. You certainly can't pick somebody up just because they talk different or look different than you. And we just want to make sure that everybody understands their constitutional protections in this space and understand what to ask for if they are contacted by ICE.
And JC, I'll just add, this is a really unsatisfying thing. This is a really heartbreaking thing to talk about. Yeah. Because we feel a little bit like our hands are tied because the federal government preempts the state government in so many areas. And we're watching them do terrible things and unconstitutional things and unacceptable things. And we're sort of like, well, don't wear masks and join mutual aid. But I guess I will just say, like, the thing that has given me the most hope is seeing the way that communities that have seen escalated pressure from ICE have stood together, created mutual aid networks, looked out for each other, looked out for their neighbors. And I think that is the most empowering thing we can do in this moment.
Thank you. Please press 0 on your keypad if you have a question for your legislators. Next, we have another question from the survey. It is Jack. And let's see. He asks, I heard something about a new thing where I can't vote for my sheriff anymore. Is that true?
No, that's not true. We've gotten a lot of email traffic about that bill. That's the Senator John Lovelett bill, who's one of our members who has a long career in law enforcement. And what that bill does is it creates minimum qualifications for sheriffs and police chiefs. It's not common knowledge, but you don't actually have to have any law enforcement experience to be elected as sheriff in Washington state. And we wanted to remedy that folks who are in charge of dispatching their officers to respond to things have that same basic law enforcement training that we require for any law enforcement officer or anybody in the Sheriff's Department in Washington State. Now, where I think this bill has gotten a lot of interesting interactions with the public is that there is also a piece about when somebody is deemed unfit to continue to hold their office. It's very clear what the guidelines for that are. It's very narrow and prescriptive, in which case, if that person is removed from office or decertified from that office, then there would be an appointment by the county council, which is just the way that we do it for any other elected official. And then that appointee would have to run for office and be voted on by the people, just like any other appointment process that we have for any other elected official. So no, we want our local communities who know these folks and who our sheriffs and police chiefs are responsible to serve. We want the local communities to be able to make those decisions, but we did also need to set some minimum standards for whether or not someone should be able to hold that office in the first place.
Thank you. We are almost at the half point of this call, so if you have a question, please press your 0 on your keypad right now, and you will be placed in the queue. Next, we have Mackenzie, who has a question about collective rights for farm workers. Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi. I'm calling in to voice my support for Senate Bill 6045 that grants collective bargaining rights to farm workers. And I just wanted to hear my senator's position on that, as well as just urge you to vote yes on that bill.
Yes, that was one of the great sadnesses of this session, was that it's not moving forward this year. I'm a very enthusiastic co-sponsor of that legislation and would have very much loved being able to vote for it on the floor. As a result of that initial proposal going forward, though, we are now putting together a pretty significant stakeholdering table over the interim to bring in our farming community and our farm worker community to come together and talk about how that should be structured. It is my viewpoint that every worker deserves dignity and fair wages and the ability to have overtime and safety protections. Every year I go to the Farm Worker Tribunal that we host in the legislature, and the stories that you hear from farm workers are alarming. I think that my sincere hope, having been, kind of at the kitchen table for that bill, is that we are able to move it next legislative session.
Thank you. Please press 0 on your keypad if you have a question. Next, we have Marta, who has a question about climate change. Hi, Marta.
Hi, my name is Marta, and I'm from Bellingham, Washington. My question regards climate change. I work in this area with about 500 other employees. This year, our jobs have been impacted by lack of snow and flooding, which forced us to push back our opening date. This made us not only unable to work, but sparked fear about if it would open at all. Many people, such as myself, rely on this job for our income during the winter months. What is the legislature doing to address climate change, and what can we do to push this legislation forward?
Thanks, Marta. Great question. That is one of many, many, many downstream consequences of the changing climate. And unfortunately, it's not the most severe, right? We see extreme weather, flooding that we saw in Whatcom and Skagit counties back in December. Another serious example. I think we're proud to say that Washington State is at the forefront of confronting the climate crisis. We have passed the Climate Commitment Act, which is a comprehensive polluter pays system that helps drive down, creates an incentive to reduce greenhouse gas pollution and reinvest that money in clean energy solutions and make sure that we're doing so in a way that's thoughtful and equitable. And I'm also really excited to say that, just over a year ago, the voters of Washington State had a choice whether they wanted to repeal that or not. And overwhelmingly, the people of Washington reaffirmed the Climate Commitment Act. So we're, I think one of the interesting things about where we are right now is that we've kind of taken the big steps and we're at implementation and making sure that those policies work the right way. So, for example, the Climate Commitment Act applies to almost all of our fossil fuel infrastructure, but there are some loopholes that a few companies have figured out how to, if you have a small enough fuel distributor, you below the reporting requirement, and they've sort of been exploiting that loophole. So we're closing that loophole. But we're also, at the same time, thinking about all of the important ways that we can invest in our clean electricity distribution system, developing renewable energy and battery electric storage systems, et cetera, and making sure that we're getting that deployed so that we can steadily transition over time to cleaner and cleaner sources for for vehicles and homes and industry.
And I'd add, I mean, we're putting, because of the Climate Commitment Act, we're able to put pretty significant resources into really successful programs like floodplains by design and like programs that we have within Department of Natural Resources to prevent wildfires. We really are on the vanguard, leading not just the nation but the world in our climate policy, and we have a lot to really be proud of. It's obviously not just Washington State that's contributing to this, and so we continue to push for stronger and stronger policies. One of the things that has risen to the top this session is around setting meaningful regulations around data centers. This is something we hear a lot from constituents about because they not only use a heck of a lot of electricity, but they use a tremendous amount of water as well. And we want to make sure that as these sorts of facilities are located in Washington State, that they're paying their fair share on the electricity bills and making it so that it's not having negative externalities for ratepayers. We want to make sure that they are aligning their water consumption with as many of our safeguards that we have for in-stream flow. And we want to ensure that they have just meaningful sideboards around what happens if we're having some kind of disaster and they don't necessarily get the first line of electrons. So that is one of the things that we're working on, really doing some deep work on, and as Rep. Ramel was mentioning around how we can get greater transmission line capacity, because we know we need to electrify both our transportation sector, so many things in our home energy use, and working on meaningful programs around energy assistance for low-income folks and seniors. And we also want to make sure that, end of a long day. I think we had more things to make sure, but
Well, since you mentioned Bellingham, I'll just bring up one exciting pet project. We've been talking about how to decarbonize Western Washington University for, I've been part of conversations in the community for going on 15 years now. Last year, we were able to bring $41 million towards that project to replace the fossil fuel-based aging steam infrastructure and start to put in a clean hot water-based system that will run on electricity.
Also, I remembered we're starting a green bank. We're calling it Washington Builds, and that's to also help at the residential level with folks getting weatherization projects done on their home. The best electricity we can save is the stuff we don't use at the outset. And so we want to make sure that we have some new and robust financing tools for those kinds of projects.
You might have hit on the topic that Liz and I would happily talk about for the rest of the hour.
Yeah, Debra too. We all are working on climate.
Okay, we love the climate. Good. Folks, please press 0 on your keypad to get your questions in. First, we're going to do a poll. So the question is, what are you most concerned about right now? Press 1 if it is federal government overreach. Press 2 if it is state budget investments. And press 3, if it is the cost of living. Again, what are you most concerned about? Federal government overreach is 1. Number 2 is state budget investments. And 3 is the cost of living. Okay, so press 0 on your keypad, please. Okay, we're going to do something a little different right now because we have a lot of questions about the millionaire's tax, several things about it. So instead of, taking them all because there's going to be repetition, I'm just going to grab some information from each of those questions and then you can tackle it, okay? Okay, so the main thing that I believe people are concerned about regarding the millionaire's tax is whether it will, the threshold will drop and then everybody's going to have to pay it. The other thing that people are concerned about is define millionaire. We got an internet question from Charles saying, what if I make $1 million a year or $1,001,000, then will the tax apply to my million plus that 1,000? People are also concerned about real estate. Are there homes considered in this tax? So maybe just break down the millionaire's tax for everybody who's got questions about it. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So you just hear millionaire's tax, and that may inspire some thoughts, but it's helpful to dig into some of those details. So the first thing is that this is a tax on $1 million earned in a year. So if you have to make more than $1 million per year to pay this tax, and essentially it functions like a deduction, which means that if you make $1,010,000, you're only taxed on the $10. The second question there was that whether your sale of a home or primary residence counts towards that, and the answer is no, it does not. We'll also highlight that any other sorts of capital gains are also taken out of that equation. And then the other question was sort of how does this impact or what is the sort of security or protection that folks have that this would not in the future be applied to other folks, which I would say is really a question that future legislatures will have to tackle. And I think I've heard overwhelmingly that there is support and enthusiasm for this idea, but not for a broader application. So for me, I think that people support this proposal and would not support dropping that threshold in the future. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a broad income tax, it's constitutionally prohibited. It requires a 2/3 majority vote of both the Senate, the House, and a vote of the people. This was carefully crafted with that in mind. And so really the idea here is that your first $1 million is not subject to this tax. What you make above that $1 million would be subject to the tax. And we were very, careful around, I live in a little Rambler and it's now worth $500,000. Like most people are sitting, if they own their home, are sitting on real estate that has appreciated in value beyond their wildest imagination. We are not trying to come after that. The other thing that this is going to enable us to do is do the largest expansion of the senior property tax exemption that we have ever had. And it is increasing and doubling the small business tax exemption. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to be able to pay for with the millionaire's tax. And I'll just reiterate, we're talking about 22,000 individuals in Washington, $3.7 billion.
So I really just want to underscore that point that was just made because, we had the question earlier really sort of focused on, collecting these revenues and then spending them. And I just really want to highlight that a major purpose of this proposal is to be able to reduce other more regressive taxes that are out there. We hear routinely from small businesses about the impact of the B&O tax, which is, probably Washington's least popular tax. We're the only state that charges a tax like it. And it's especially difficult to start a business under B&O. And so expanding that exemption would, I think, be a major boost for Washington's economy. We're talking about targeted sales tax exemptions, many other similar kinds of investments to be able to bring down the most regressive and impactful taxes and replace them with a much more fair tax code overall.
All right. Thank you. Okay. First, I'm going to tell you what you guys thought in the poll. So 58% of you are most concerned about federal government overreach. 28% of you are concerned about the cost of living, and 13% are concerned about state budget investments. Okay, next, press 0 if you have a question first. Next, we're going to go with Landon, who has a question about potholes and bikes. Hi, Landon.
Hi. I was just wondering if you could possibly contact the local construction workers if they could fill in the potholes on Meridian Street, or actually no, not Meridian Street, McLeon Road, if that's close to
in Bellingham, in North Bellingham.
The what?
Is that in North Bellingham? Is that where you're pointing to?
Yes. Do you know where Bellis Ferrer Mall is?
Yes. Yep. So what I will point you towards for this is, so that's a city government, and we work for the state government. But Bellingham is an awesome tool called See, Click, Fix. It's an app that you can download. You take a photo of the problem, whether it's a pothole or something wrong, clogs stormwater drain or whatever else you see, and it immediately sends that as a work order to the Bellingham Public Works. It's called See, Click, Fix. It's a great tool and a cool opportunity to get that information directly, and then it'll locate it right there so that they'll be able to see exactly where it is and see what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I would just add, somebody had asked earlier about the condition of Commercial Avenue in Anacortes, and the reason why that is a state project is because it's actually Highway 20. But this year in both of the transportation budgets, House and Senate, we put record investments into preservation and maintenance because we know that our roads are in rough shape. The more of these heavy rain events and flooding events we have, the more that wears our transportation systems down. And so we're investing in things like culverts to make sure that water is flowing where it's supposed to help reduce that wear and tear, and really thinking about some important preservation, maintenance, and safety projects in addition to multimodal investments in transit and bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So lots of good projects coming your way on the portions of our state transportation system.
Thank you. Folks, we have about 15 minutes left of this call, so get your question in, press 0. Next, we are going to go with another of the survey questions, and it's Nancy, and her question is, are there any bills to regulate AI? It feels like things are moving very quickly and getting out of hand fast.
Yeah, I hear you, Nancy. There are a lot of concerns out there, and some of which are in our purview and some of which are not, but I'll point in the direction of a few things that we're trying to do. One is just sort of a question of informed consent when you're interacting with the chat online. You've got a right to know. You should have a right to know whether you're talking to a person or to an AI. And so there needs to be a standard requirements for routinely being reminded that you may be talking to artificial intelligence and not a real person. I think we also want to make sure we've got thoughtful standards around how that's allowed in public schools, especially automated decision think about school penalties for kids who may have misbehaved or whatever else. Those kinds of questions. And then the other issue was already touched on is that the data centers that the AI requires are a major cost driver in electricity costs, and will be even more so in the future unless we're able to separate out the costs of providing electricity to those data centers from the rest of the electricity ratepayers, so that they pay their own way and don't sort of get a free ride based on the infrastructure that the rest of us have paid to build.
Yeah, we have one additional bill that is working through the process right now that has to do with how the public understands whether a video or an audio recording is in fact AI generated. So that just left the Senate Energy, Environment, and Technology Committee yesterday, is moving through our fiscal committee, and I hope that we will be voting it off the floor soon here, because I think the AI is just advancing so quickly. And we do actually have an AI task force that has been providing some of these recommendations on things like the chatbots and other pieces of policy that are under consideration this year. But I think it's just absolutely vital, with especially how rapidly the video technology is progressing, that people understand whether a video that they're watching is real life or if it's something that someone generated using AI technology.
Thank you. Okay. So please press 0 if you have a question. Next is Oak, and she has questions about, I'm not exactly sure, data centers and Oak, are you there?
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hey, so I'm an electrician. Last summer I was working on data centers in Central Washington, even though I don't support them just because I have to work, but when I was there, I was thinking about all the dams on the Columbia, and I've been wondering and haven't been able to find an answer on my own if the government state government is planning or intending to remove the dams and do habitat restoration on the Columbia, and if so, like what the alternative energies will be, because I want to express that I'm definitely in support of that. But I've just looked into it and haven't found a clear answer on if our government intends to do anything with removing those dams.
Yeah, great question. I'll take a first run at it. So there are 4 dams that are under deliberation, the lower Snake River dams, for potential removal. It is not a state government choice. I will tell you that, if you want my opinion, I think that we should uphold the treaties, and I don't see how we can uphold the treaties with the tribes there that depend on the salmon and keep the dams. And so if we can only keep our promises or keep the dams, we got to keep our promises, is my position on the dams. But that is a federal government decision. So what we can do in Washington State is try to be ready for a federal government that will one day, I believe, remove those dams, and make sure that we've been investing in replacement infrastructure for the electricity, as you mentioned, but also the transportation impact, the irrigation impacts. There are a lot of communities that have built up around those dams. And if and when they come down, we ought to be able to make sure that those communities are still kept whole. So that's kind of my position on it. Specific to the energy question, we've got to build out a lot more clean energy, and there are some I think exciting opportunities on the horizon. And I'll just mention my pet bill, which is probably the wonkiest thing I've ever worked on, but it's the overlap of clean energy policy and tax policy. But I think if we reconfigure the way that wind farms and solar farms are taxed in Washington State, we can be both a welcoming place for those kinds of projects, but also make sure that when those projects are in those communities, they're reinvesting in the schools and the county government and the fire districts and the libraries, et cetera. So I think if we can get that formula fixed, we can be saying yes to a lot of clean energy projects, which will free up space to be able to take care of the salmon and keep our promises in those treaties.
Okay, we have a little time left, and another issue that people are asking about is ICE, and there are numerous questions about this, so I think I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the millionaire's tax, and that way everybody gets their question answered. So let's see, people are concerned about the masked officers, and so they want to know what's happening with the masks bill. Another thing people are concerned about is detention centers. Apparently, they want to get another one here in Washington. Another thing that is concerning to them is how do you make sure that they actually have warrants? So in general, maybe talk a little bit about the package of bills and the work that you've been doing to protect all Washingtonians.
Yeah, I mean, I will start. I think it is both a Senate and House priority to pass the masking bill, and a priority of the governor's office as well. That is one thing where we have very strong alignment about making sure that folks feel that they can have trust with their local law enforcement by knowing that the expectation is that nobody who's picking them up should be wearing a mask. As far as the detention centers go, so there are, I would say, a proliferation of small holding areas that are not full detention centers where they hold people temporarily before they move to the larger detention center. We're trying to figure out what, if anything, we have jurisdiction over. But this will, my wonky space of policy is around land use and local government. And one of the things that we did many years ago was de-designating the Tacoma Detention Facility as being a, quote, essential public facility. And what that means is that it is required to do all of the paperwork, all of the public hearings, all of the appeals processes that being considered an essential public facility would have exempted them from. So we put that in place many years ago, understanding that the federal government had wanted to expand that facility, and we put those safeguards in place probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we continue to work on how to do inspections. One of the bills that did make it through the Senate, and we're hoping will also make it through the House, it has to do with Department of Health being able to give random inspections as well. Having eyeballs in these facilities to make sure that they are meeting minimum human rights standards is an absolute necessity and oversight. But there are jurisdictional challenges. We think our departments of health are appropriate places for that to transpire, and so very hopeful for that bill to make it through the process as well. As far as the warrants go, again, I highly recommend looking up. I think it's on the Attorney General's webpage around knowing your rights, around what kind of warrant an officer is issuing and what your rights are in response to that. So we've tried to make those very clear so that people know what their rights are if they are being contacted by law enforcement. And you know what I will say is this has so many different impacts in our community beyond just folks that feel like they're being targeted by ICE. You know, we just had a major flooding event in our community, and it was very difficult to evacuate people because nobody knew who to trust. If it's, you know, is it law enforcement? Is it ICE who's coming to my door telling me to evacuate? So, you know, we are noticing that there are a lot of externalities to what happens in, you know, any number of emergencies and disasters if we are not making sure that we are taking care of all Washingtonians, that all Washingtonians feel safe contacting law enforcement in the event of an emergency, and that all Washingtonians are awarded due process, the right to understand why they're under arrest, the right to contact an attorney. So those are all things that we will continue to uphold and continue to make sure are safeguarded.
Yeah, and I will just add that, well said, Liz. We'll just add that, you know, we have had repeated and numerous conversations with police chiefs and sheriffs in Whatcom, Skagit, and San Juan County about this issue to make sure, and have heard repeatedly that keep Washington working are our state law that says state law enforcement, city, county law enforcement does not enforce immigration policy and does not work with ICE. They know that it's part of their routine training. They're reminding our local law enforcement of that on a regular basis. And I'm grateful to the leadership there for doing that.
All right, thank you. We are almost done here. We have exactly 5 minutes left. We are going to take another question from Jesse, who has a question about D.C. and the president. Jesse, I'm going to give you 1 minute to ask your questions so that they have a chance to answer, okay? Jesse, please go ask your question. Jesse? Okay, well, maybe we don't have Jesse on the line. All right. Well, then let's just go to closing remarks. Please start, Senator, and maybe talk a little bit about what work you guys are going to be doing during the interim.
Oh, wow. That's right. We get an interim at the end of all of this. Well, you know what? Interim is the time where we get to actually be back in our communities, meeting with community members, with local organizations, with our local elected officials. We do site visits and tours. We get to take deep dives with constituents and really try to understand what issues they care about. And then in the off season too, we have our incredible staffers helping with things like escalating unemployment claims and helping make sure that that there is really solid customer service in our government that makes sure that people are getting responses to the things that they need. So things that I'm working on over the interim, I had a couple of really big, exciting bills that I did not ask to move through the process this year because they cost money. So I'm going to keep working on them for next year. One of the things I'm most excited about is providing a regulatory framework for the scalping ticket market for our arts and music venues in Washington state. We know there's a real problem with people getting ripped off buying tickets, that the venues are not the beneficiaries nor are the artists. So we need to put some basic protections in place to make sure that that we're not selling speculative tickets, that tickets are, that if you buy it from a third-party seller, that you get to use that ticket when you get to the door. We've got some real basic consumer protections that need to be in place. So working with the Attorney General's Office, Department of Revenue, Department of Licensing, and others to hopefully bring that to fruition next year. I'll speak for one for Debra and I that we've been working on for a couple of years on regulating the sulfur intensity of marine fuels. We're really working hard with our ports and our marine shipping organizations and our environmental orgs to make sure that the types of heavy fuels that are used in our large maritime operations are very big polluters. There are alternatives out there, and we want to make sure that they're using that both for air quality and for water quality purposes. So those are two of the big things that I'm looking forward to picking back up and working on in the interim. But mostly it's just exciting to be in districts, getting to visit, getting to live in the most beautiful place in the world, seeing you guys at concerts and events and even at the grocery store, making sure that we're staying connected to our communities and hearing about what's going on in your lives and how we can always strive to do better. And I'll just say this team is amazing, both our legislative team, but our staff as well. We always try to have a no wrong door policy to just ensure that folks are getting the support that they need. So thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thanks, Liz. I will just jump in with one last thing that didn't come up in the questions, but I think deserves to be talked about, which is a couple of initiatives to the legislature that we received. These are petitions that the request from some folks for the legislature to consider policies. If we choose not to act on them, then they go to the ballot. These two policies are both focused on trans youth. we've made the decision not to have hearings and not to contemplate them at the legislative level, and we've gotten some questions about that. And I really just want to explain a little bit why. One of those policies would ban trans women from participating in school sports. There are about 12 such people in Washington state that law would impact. And I just ask people to think about what it would feel like if you were a teenager struggling to do your homework and everything we all struggled with as teenagers. Nope, I'm getting cut. But I guess I want to just say, let's please all have some empathy for those kids and what it must feel like to have so much vitriol targeted at them for political purpose. So we chose not to have hearings on them, and I expect and anticipate that the voters of Washington will make the right decision. I look forward to seeing everybody as soon as legislative session is over. Thank you all for participating this evening, and have a great night.
All right. Hey, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. If you didn't get to ask your question, you can leave a message for your legislators at the conclusion of this call, which is right now. Good night.